And welcome to the September 14th meeting of the City Council's Legislative Affairs Committee. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording for public broadcast, and I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting please identify yourself for the record by standing and stating your name and address. Seeing none, I ask that all devices please be placed in silent mode at this time. All right. We have 5 items, 6 items on our agenda. Nope, 5 items on our agenda this evening. I'd like to begin by asking if anyone in the audience would like to make any public comment. Please approach the center podium, identify yourself by name and address, and the item on the agenda on which you wish to speak, and then you may speak for not more than 2 minutes. I will note for the record that the public was advised that they could contact the clerk's office to participate remotely, and no one has done so.
Good evening. I'm Janet Yost, 2 Brigham Park, recently redesigned to be Ward 5. So I'm here to speak relative to 222-22, and specifically that is that the potential for every vehicle registered in Fitchburg would be charged $200 per year for a total of 5 years in an attempt to help to pave our city streets. I wrote down some comments, which I'm going to amend. I started out with, I have every confidence that the proposal of $200 per vehicle registered in Fitchburg is a sincere attempt to solve a problem. But now I'm not so sure, having sat through the most recent meeting here this evening, and I see that there is, from Councilperson Boschman, some angry words about funding. One of the things that was specific to the library, he said, I'm tired of being poor. Ditto. He said, I'm retired and still poor. Ditto. My concern more so is that I was not aware that city council persons can propose additional fees to be paid by residents. I understand very clearly that this is just the beginning phase and that potentially this would go to a ballot for all registered voters in our city. As many of you may be aware, we were told way back, those of us of a certain age, that when the Mass Turnpike was complete, the tolls would end. The Mass Turnpike was complete in 1967. I just paid tolls on Sunday coming back from New York. So I'm concerned that this is a loose cannon, that this could go badly in many directions. And frankly, if I am asked to spend $200 per year for 5 years, I'd like to send that money, for example, to the library. I don't know that I necessarily want my money to pave the roads. I think it's very, very bold of someone to introduce the possibility of me as a taxpayer and homeowner that I have to pay more money for their agenda. And that troubles me. And I ask you as city council folks to be aware that we have to have more consensus and more input from the people that would be most affected by this. So I must say in all sincerity that I strongly disagree with this proposal. I thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Good evening. Kevin Fitzpatrick, 23 Bridle Cross, new resident of Fitchburg from about 40 years. I've come back. But anyways, I'm talking in opposition to petition 222-22. And again, like this woman just stated, you know, I'm tired of being poor too. With 8.5% of the cost of living going up, Not even talking about the cost of heating for people this year with the price of gas and heating oil. And don't forget, our property taxes will probably be going up just based on the cost of real estate. So our assessed values will probably be going up on top of it. And on top of the wonderful projects that you people talked about tonight. So I just feel that this is a wrong thing at this time right now. I drive down I know some of the roads aren't great in the town, but the governor has also stated that they're allowing more money for cities and towns for infrastructure projects. And I think we have to rely more on our state and federal elected officials to get some more money into the town to take care of it. And that's the way I feel. Thank you.
Sam Squalia, 225 Scott Road. I am speaking to you regarding petition 13822 in order to change the council rules to disallow councilors from speaking announcements unless recited by the council president and submitted 48 hours prior to the meeting. So I have some words for this, and I've compiled some data that I'm going to pass out. With all the actual and real important issues going on in our city, we have councilors focusing their time and energy proposing petitions like 13822 to disallow councilors from making announcements at the end of our meetings. The result being limiting communication to our residents, of course. So I have compiled the data from the previous 1 year's worth of city council meetings. In the past 12 months of city council meetings, the total time spent in meetings was 21.28 hours. The total time spent by councilors making announcements to the public, we are talking about 4.7 minutes. That is a whopping total of 0.37% of the past year's worth of city council meetings spent making announcements to constituents. Mind you, these are announcements not made by the president. One of the petition councilors referred to the announcements as a free-for-all. And again, we are speaking about 0.37%, less than 5 minutes total out of 21.2 hours in an entire year. If we spend more than 4.7 minutes talking about this proposal, we will have wasted more time than all councilors have spent in the past entire year actually making announcements. If we spend 14 minutes talking about this proposal, that would be more than 3 years' worth of councilors' actual announcements. So which one is wasting more time? This petition or the entire year's worth of community announcements by city councilors to the residents? With all the important issues going on in our city, I believe this petition is a complete waste of our time and should be given leave to withdraw immediately. Thank you. I'll pass that.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Miranda Toja Robbins, 202 Highland Ave. At first, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to sit in the audience and watch and observe. But since one of the two counselors that decided to propose this, the public should know that at least one of them is like just sitting in the background with his headphones on, not even listening to what the public has to say about their petition. Also, having said that, that very same counselor also used a word that everybody else wants to throw around, which is the word poor. So since everybody wants to throw that word around, we'll go ahead and talk about what it's like to be poor. You know, $200 a month. Like, I mean, I get it to some of you, or a year, I'm sorry, $200 a year. That's what I get in food stamps a month. You want to talk about poor. So what you're asking me to do, and not just me, but others that are just like me that live in this city, you're asking us to pick a month to give you our food stamps, pretty much, to fix your, what is budget error, fiscal irresponsibility, whatever. You know, you go to Lunenburg, you can literally close your eyes and go across the road, you know, any direction. No other city seems to, but yeah. And since this is like just kind of like out of the blue, I might as well just say something randomly on 138-22 as well. That is kind of like, the reason I think that this is on this petition is because I've been coming to these meetings for a while, and I was here when there was a raft between city councilors because of a councilor wanting to throw in an announcement towards it. And I actually see the ridiculousness in this. And if anybody has something to say, news happens, gosh, at the flip of a switch. We all know that. 48 hours, who knows what can happen in 48 hours? You guys are supposed to be our government, our leaders. And you're saying that somebody can't throw something in without telling within 48 hours in advance? That is kind of ridiculous. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Further comments? All right. I will just note for the public that unless I'm greatly mistaken, the headphones that Councillor Boschman has in right now are actually tied into the speaker system. They're a hearing assist.
I apologize.
Quite all right. People make mistakes. But at any rate, the first item on our agenda is 02822, Councillor Sam Squalia, to increase available resident off-street parking during a snow emergency as outlined in the enclosed petition. Councillor, would you like to present your petition?
Yes, largely, the proposed verbiage was based off City of Fitchburg, modeled with the City of Worcester, how they do that with their parking garage. I'm glad that Ann Cervantes is here so that she can provide further context and suggestions or amendments to the petition. The large crux of the issue is that the city keeps removing available parking during snow emergencies, and there is a large need, especially in neighborhoods. And someone had suggested that, if we could fully utilize the Putnam Street parking garage, and I said, that's a great idea. I will put that in, and then we can have a discussion, and hopefully we can come to a better, more inclusive system of snow parking. So I'm amenable to amending this petition. Of course, the purpose really is largely to start a dialogue and hopefully increase more available snow parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to make any comments, Ms. Cervantes?
Thank you. I have one concern that I'd like to express about the Putnam Garage. The floors above the ground floor are secured with a gate that closes. That gate is left closed every night and on the weekends. Part of what folks pay for when they purchase a permit to park in the upper levels of the Putnam Garage is to have that gate closed at night and on the weekends. So I'm not sure how we could leave it open during a snowstorm, overnight or on a weekend if we happen to have a storm then. So that's one concern I have with the Putnam Garage. The other thing I wanted to mention is, on the other hand, at the Boulder Garage, the city recently designated about 50 spaces as 2-hour free parking, and that could easily be used as additional parking during a snowstorm. So I would suggest that we do that. Thank you.
Councillor Van Hazinga?
Just before you go, Ms. Cervantes, so could you please summarize the parking that we do make available? Because I know there's a map posted on the city website, and we do have a policy of allowing some parking in off-street spaces to accommodate residents who have to leave the street during snowstorms.
I can. We allow parking on the ground floor of the Putnam Garage. There's also parking on the Main Street lot in the center section of the lot. There is some parking at the metered spaces on the ground floor of the intermodal garage. There's parking at the Coolidge Park lot. There's the Hastings lot at Pleasant and High Street. There's parking available there. There's also parking at Park Hill Park. So those are the areas in the city where
Now,
snow parking
has
is
the
available.
parking enforcement staff done any surveys during snowstorms to see how many of these spaces are utilized or if there's demand for more spaces?
No, we have not.
And I guess my other concern with this proposal is that we use especially in the downtown area, the public parking facilities as a tool to support future development. Presently, the most recent multifamily development we've had of size rents monthly spaces in the Mill Street deck. I forget the official name of that parking garage. But it's also a tool that we've used. The city is trying to stimulate more residential development along Main Street in this downtown area. And one of the tools we have is the availability of parking that can be rented on a monthly basis. So I would be concerned if things are opened in a free-for-all that the people who pay for a monthly space to have that ability to park, whether there's a snowstorm or doesn't have a snowstorm, lose their space because someone else comes into the garage seeking to get off the street in a snow emergency. So I guess one of the challenges would be to how could we manage that if we expand the available snowstorm parking area?
That's another concern I have about the Putnam Garage, about how it actually would work if we did do it there. In other areas, such as the Mill Street deck that you're referring to, the parking's all in the center, so we have one area that we can designate. The perimeter are rented spaces, but the center is the open parking, so we can do that. And we can do a similar thing down below in the Boulder Garage, as I just mentioned. So those areas, it's simple, but I don't think it would be quite as simple with the Putnam Garage with the different, there's different types of parking on the upper floors, and some of it is areas, we have scattered spaces that are rented out and other spaces aren't, so it would be very hard to designate, you know, the spaces where people could park during a snowstorm and not park during a snowstorm.
I apologize, Ms. Squally, I don't have the text of the petition in front of me. I just have the agenda. Does the petition highlight specific areas that would be allowed?
I don't have the text of the petition in front of me either. Sorry.
He's looking at it right now.
Okay.
Does not.
So the petition is just to increase available. It does not identify specific spaces or areas?
I don't have it in front of me. Increase available resident off-street parking during snow emergency. Municipal garages. So it does designate municipal garages in general.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I would concur that I would certainly have grave concerns about anything that would potentially conflict with our contractual duties to people who are already renting spaces. If there is a way that we can make this work, that would be good. But both existing and, as Councillor Van Hazinga noted, potentially future rental arrangements that we might want to make available would have to be honored, and there would be some nuances to work out. But the concept, I can see the impetus. Further comments from councillors? Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do, I think it's a good thought and an idea, but I do share some of the same concerns. I wonder if we should maybe hold the petition until we can find specific areas that would be available for residents to use during a snowstorm.
Any objections?
I would second that. If you put that in motion, I would second it.
So moved.
All right, and having no objections, we will hold this petition. Next up, we have 10522, City Auditor Calvin Brooks, to amend the City Code, Chapter 3, Administration, Article 17. Sorry, my Roman numerals are a little rusty. Insurance Commission, Section 3-160, Establishment, Composition, by removing Superintendent of Public Buildings and inserting in its place Director of Facilities, as outlined in the enclosed petition. Auditor Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll read the paragraph that was on the petition. The position of Superintendent of Public Buildings does not exist within the current structure of city government, and the seat on the Insurance Commission has been historically filled by the Building Commissioner. With the creation of the Facilities Department and the Director of Facilities position, there is now a more appropriate position to sit on the Insurance Commission. So what we're asking is that it basically be changed from the Building Commissioner to the Director of Facilities. The Insurance Commission basically looks at all of the insurance policies that the city has and manages that. The commission did recommend this change.
That does sound squarely within the ambit of what we proposed for the Director of Facilities.
Motion to approve.
I have Councillor Cragen.
Excuse me.
Just a quick comment. I believe that the title in the school department is also Director of Facilities, so this puts us in alignment with our, our fellow department.
All right.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a
Second.
second? I have a motion and second to approve. Any objections? Seeing none, it is approved.
Thank you.
Uh, 13822, Councilors Di Natale and Kuchar to insert a city council rule that states as follows: any and all public announcements that a councilor or councilors wish to have announced at the biweekly regular city council meetings must be submitted to the council president no later than 48 hours prior to the meeting in writing, and said announcements shall be recited by council president.
Motion to leave to withdraw.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from the sponsor, from one of the two sponsors to give leave
Second.
to withdraw. Motion and second. Any objection? All right, it is given, well, rather, the recommendation of the committee will be that it be given leave to withdraw.
Permission to speak on the motion?
Go right ahead. I should have asked first. I apologize.
Thanks. So as the person who took up an entire whopping 1 minute 40 seconds on Councillor Squelia's research, which is impressive, that is a lot of listening and fast forwarding, I would like to say that the school committee has as a regular part of its procedure an opportunity for following public comment the announcements and public sharing of information that often turns into. And that is a very useful component of our public meeting, because it does remind people of things happening in the community. To limit the communication to a 48-hour window presupposes that we will not have sudden vigils that occur because of tragedies, or we will not have events that need to be responded to immediately. And I work very hard not to go on, and I read from a precise piece of paper and hand you a precise piece of paper. So I appreciate my colleague, Councillor Kuchar's leave to withdraw, and that is all I have to say on this motion. But I am very happy to have folks in Fitchburg a chance to hear, other things happening in the city, because we all need to communicate. I started a newsletter last year, the Reveille, to communicate just events so people know what's happening. And we get to tell people what's happening. What a blessing for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'll also just briefly comment that it has been my policy as president to request that announcements come through my chair, and councilors have been very good generally about doing that. But I do try to be lenient about it. I'm certainly, I am not inclined to tell someone that they can't make an announcement because they didn't give me the paper in advance or something. I like to keep it coming through the chair just so that everything stays orderly and organized. But again, I don't see a need for a firm rule on this matter, especially as some future president may have a different preference. 19022, an ordinance that a vacant property and registration, be added to Chapter 137 of the Fitchburg City Code as outlined in the enclosed ordinance. I do not see Tom. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see you there. Come right on up.
Hi, thank you. My name's Liz Murphy. I work for the Community Development Department. I will be honest, I became aware of this being on the agenda today. I am not sure. I understand that there may have been typos or discrepancy in the language at the last reading. I don't know what those discrepancies or typos are, so I'm not sure how to respond to this.
I would, nah, I can't, not under the rules. I would suggest then that the committee hold this until such time as we can get a comprehensive report on it. And I apologize for any lack of notice that you got on this.
Wasn't you. Thank you.
So moved. Second?
I have a motion and second to hold. Any objections? All right, we will hold it. Last item. Councilors Paul Boschman and Anthony Zarella to place on the November general election ballot a question substantially similar to that outlined in the enclosed petition relative to an annual road use fee and to research the steps necessary to implement such a policy if approved by the voters. And I will let Councilor Boschman introduce this first, as he was the mastermind behind it, who brought it to me about a year ago for basically.
My name's Paul Boschman, the city councilor and the taxpayer of the city of Fitchburg. First of all, before I start, I want to thank Councilor Cruz, Councilor Schultz, Councilor Handy, and you, Mr. President, for allowing it to get this far, for wanting to hear the whole story. A couple of years ago, I've been thinking about it, and I talked to the previous council president, and he thought it was a very good idea on this move. Now, you're going to want to know where I got the $4 million to $8 million. I never planned on $8 million. I figured on $4 million. There's approximately 35,000 excise bills going out. I took approximately 20,000, and I said 20 times 2 is 4. So I came up with the number $200. That's because that gives you $4 million. Now, I wasn't about to charge if somebody has 5 cars, because you and I talked about this, and I always said that. I wasn't going to charge everybody $200 if they had 5 cars or 4 cars or up to 3 cars, they said. 3. And what ended up happening is, after doing my research and I've been thinking about it, I found a letter dated June 3rd, 2019 from the previous commissioner. And I'm just going to highlight. He claims, when he was the commissioner, we need approximately $8 to $9 million a year just to start putting a dent in the roads. $8 to $9 million. He says we have 182 miles of road in the city of Fitchburg. And all we get is $1.2 million. It's not cutting it. We're falling behind. Our roads are immensely bad. I get people that call me up, and I got a letter in my box. The guy spent $1,500 to have his front end work done. I spent $2,400. I averaged 3,000 to 4,000 miles a year, and it cost me $2,400 to have my front end work done. I had a guy on St. Joseph Avenue. If you want to know the names, I can give you the names. He had to have his whole front end replaced. And if he was lucky, it was a brand new car, and the guy told him he'd never seen anything like it from driving the streets of Pittsburgh. This petition was not to hurt anybody. This petition was to help people, not hurt them. I stopped at a gas station today, and a guy pointed something out in a car, and they didn't even know that their front end was gone. You can see the ball joints hanging. Driving around last year, there was over 11 cars on the side of the roads that needed to be towed because they lost their front ends. The wheels fell off. The ball joints broke because of the roads of the Fitchburg. So I decided with my colleague to come up and propose it. I'm willing to negotiate. This is not etched in stone. And I feel that the people of Fitchburg should have the right to vote on the issue, whether they want it done or not. I feel that we as a body, should have been sitting down, discussing this issue, and trying to compromise on how much we should charge and where, and on what cars. But the 5 councilors, they wanted it, we're here today, and I say again, thank you. Now, this is why I ask. And I also asked the council, because I really had the whole heart of the city of Pittsburgh at heart, that do you know that when we did Prospect Street,
Counselor, please address the council, not...
Bartell Street. We did Bartell Street, the wastewater team separated water and sewer. They're, according to their contract, and I understand the contract, and we voted on it, they're supposed to pave curb to curb. And I ask you, as a ratepayer, why am I paying wastewater to pave the roads? Why am I? The water bills are real high, and they're going up again. So we're telling waste manager, wastewater, after you dig up the roads, we want you to pave curb to curb. It's going to take 20 years of you paying, and those prices are never coming down. Why would you want that? Why would you want that? I don't want it. Why would you want it? I figured this would help all of us. So we wouldn't have an extra bill, a high bill, and they could take, if it cost them $1 million, because I'm told that it costs $1 million a mile, so it's costing wastewater $1 million a mile. And they're taking out a 20-year note at $30 million, and you can see it in your bills every time you flush the toilet or grab water. And they're going up again. And I figured that if they did like they did on Clarendon Street, if I read the numbers right, they gave $380,000. That's approximately a mile. It's a mile long. They saved $600,000 not given to us, so they can use it for other parts of the city to dig up the streets to put the separation of water. And I thought it was a good idea. And I still maintain that this proposal is a very good idea. It's very fair, and it's very, very good. And it's helping everybody, even the poor who drive cars in the city of Fitchburg pay. They have to have their cars repaired too, not just Boschman or somebody else. They all have to have cars repaired because the roads is that bumpy. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. That's where I see it. And if we could sit down as a board and talk about it and say, let's go. We have to collect. We have to make a dent, and I told Anthony that. We have to get at least $4 million a year, not counting the $1 million from the state, the $1.2 million from the state, not counting if we can talk to the mayor to give us at least $1 million every year from, the pot places and that, or find it if he can, $1 million, that would be $6 million. And that would give us $30 million after 5 years. And then, ma'am, the voters would get the opportunity again to go back and vote on it, because that's the way it was written. It was, right, Anthony? 5 years. That's it. And then it goes back to the public, and they voted on it again for another 5 years if they want it. Now, some of you, I understand, wanted a debt exclusion. Well, I'm going to point out something on a debt exclusion. On a debt exclusion, if you took out $30 million, and I used the number $30 million because that's what I was figuring on for 5 years, we were going to get approximately $30 million. $30 million to pay back in 10 years would cost you $300 and some odd on a house that was worth $250,000. That's it. On a house that's worth $500,000, it would cost you $600. And I say to you, and I say to all of you, why should I pay for a guy that's got 6 cars driving on the street and he has a house that's only $250,000, and if I happen to have a house that's worth $500,000 and I pay for his cars, that's not fair. That isn't fair to the ratepayer. Why should an elderly person that does not have a car in the city of Fitchburg, that owns a house, and you have to take other transportation, has to pay? And maybe they have a $500,000 home, and why should she or he pay? Why should the poor people pay? Because know what's going to end up happening. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. We raise the rents, we raise the taxes on the roads construction. The guy that's living in the apartment house that can't afford it is going to pay more in his rent because the taxes went up. And the funny part about it, it will never go back down. And I know I talk kind of rough, but I'm being realistically, because I know what I'm talking about. Rents don't go down. They go up, but they never go down. So I come here tonight to ask you to discuss it. I don't know what we're supposed to do, Anthony, if we can send it back to the full council so we can all discuss and all be part of it, or I'm willing to negotiate if you want to do it here. I talk to Andy, Councilor Andy all the time, and you all the time, and I bug him all the time, and I'm willing to negotiate, and I can tell you I got my paperwork here already of what we have. And I think you have it too, the same thing. You know, we get, to be honest, we get 24,731 cars, 24,000. But I never figured on, I was always going to say 40,000 registered voters. I always figured I wasn't about to go and charge a guy that had 5 cars or a guy that had 6 cars $1,200. I figured, and we talked, Andy, and you talked, we worked down. But they should pay. They actually should pay. And that's how I feel, and I think, honestly, this is a very good proposal for the city of Fitchburg. It's a very good proposal for taxpayers. We're hurt. This is our home. This is our home. And we're hurting one another. Not only are we hurting one another, we're also hurting the possibility of probably getting businesses to come here. Now, we've been talking about these roads for the city of Fitchburg for well over 15 years. Well over 15 years, and I can prove it because I wrote a letter to the letterbox 15 years ago complaining about the roads. 15 years ago. So we got to do something. We just can't just say, yeah, I know the roads are bad. I know the roads are bad. But the roads are bad. And I get people telling me they're going to move out of the city, just like people come in. This guy told me, I can't drive my car, the roads are not good, and I want to move. So that, I'm not lying either. So I give it to you. I get the list here, and I get all the codes and how many cars they got, and you get the same thing. So I think we'd be foolish not to try to act. I think the public should have a say, not 5 people, not 11 people. Let the public decide if they want it. They'll vote yes, they get out and vote. If they don't want it, all they have to do is say no on the ballot. And it's as simple as that. Nobody gets hurt on this. Why people get so upset on a proposal, I can't figure it out for the likes of me. But it's a proposal. A proposal for somebody to ask a question and to put it on the ballot, and you go down and do your civic duty and say, yes, I like it, Paul Boschman and Anthony, we like it, Andy, we like this, let's do it. And go back. And if you don't like it, don't vote for it. So I'll take any questions if you want. And
So I'm going to weigh in a little bit as well. Like I said, Councillor Boschman brought this to me about a year ago, and we've been working on it since. I understand many of the objections that people have. And honestly, the fact that I think this is a good idea, but I understand that many reasonable residents may disagree, is exactly why I think we need to put this on the ballot so that we can get an actual sense for whether the residents as a whole, think this is a good idea or not. Because I can say, and this is in no way intended as anything against the individuals who came to speak tonight. In fact, I'm glad you did. I wish more people would. But I have noticed over the years that it's not always possible to tell whether a lot of communication on a given issue, on one side of a given issue, reflects the opinion of the broader public or reflects the opinion of the people who are motivated to come to the meetings. Which, again, that's why I think we should put this on the ballot, because it is an issue that affects the entire city. I don't want to belabor the proposal itself any further, because I said my piece on it at the original council meeting, and Councillor Boschman has outlined some of the ideas behind it, but I did want to address some of the specific points that were raised by our residents. One is just to reiterate that, yes, believe me, I know the problem of government instituting purpose-driven fees that then just never go away like a bad cold. And that's why there is a 5-year sunset clause on this. If it were to be approved by the voters and then passed by the council, and then it were not reapproved 5 years later, it would stop automatically. The other issue is this would be a segregated fund. The problem with, as one of our speakers noted, the highway tolls, for example, is that unless I'm greatly mistaken, those go into the state's general fund. They can be spent on all sorts of things, not just on the turnpike construction, which is obviously long since complete. I'm sorry, we can't take audience comments during deliberations. But in this instance, the intent has always been to put this revenue into a legally binding separate fund that can only be spent on road repair, sidewalk repair, and equipment for those purposes. There is also, because this is something that someone raised to me, there is also an intent, at least on the part of Councillor Boschman and myself, that the final form of this ordinance would include language so that it can't simply be used to replace existing DPW funding. In other words, no future mayor could decide, hey, we're getting $4 million out of this road use fee, so we'll just cut the DPW budget by $4 million and call it a day. There will be language to prevent that so that it guarantees this will be additional revenue. There was a question as to the authorization for this action, and that's actually something that I discussed with the city solicitor a while back. And it's actually why we're structuring this as a road use fee, because the city is allowed to charge additional amounts if it's tied directly to a service provided, in this case, road maintenance. And believe me, I wish we had the money to do the road maintenance without asking anything additional of the taxpayers, but we don't. The intent here was that doing it this way guarantees that we're getting the money from the people who are benefiting the most from the roads and not taking it from, as Councillor Boschman said, people who may have higher property values but don't actually use the roads very much. That being said, there is a plan. I should backtrack a step. This ballot question is not a binding ballot initiative in the sense that the state allows for. In other words, if it is approved by the voters, it would not thereby become law. This is not an ordinance that will be put on the ballot. Rather, if it's put on the ballot, an affirmative vote would be an instruction to the council to begin the process of crafting this ordinance. And at that point, a lot of details would need to be worked out. There's simply no way that it could all be put on the ballot because a well-crafted law of this sort could easily be a few pages in length. And part of those details that have always been my intention, at least, to include in the final ordinance would be various limits and exemptions on who we're charging and how much. There should be a lower limit, for vehicle value where you're just not going to be charged, because what I like to put it as is, if you've got a college student driving around in a $1,500 beater, we're not going to charge them $100, $200 on that. Additionally, I would like to see some form of exemption for seniors on a fixed income. Maybe one car per person is exempt from the fee. Because, again, I understand that there are people for whom these fees would be a burden. And really that's the goal here, is to calibrate this properly. And $200 is an initial suggestion. But to calibrate this properly so that there is an outsized benefit relative to a fairly small burden. There's a lot of work to do to get that properly calibrated. What we want to find out on the ballot is if people are interested in this concept, if people are interested in the idea of paying, a road use fee to improve the road paving situation. We have, just a second, we have essentially three alternatives to this proposal, not counting any creative ideas that people might bring to us, which I would love. But as far as standard alternatives, we have three. Technically four. I'll say four. One is we just keep asking the state for money. It's been 15 years. We're not getting the amount that we need from the state. Now, I do want to note that our state delegation has secured for us a fairly large sum, I don't have the number in front of me, but a fairly large sum in targeted infrastructure grants from the state, specifically for things like bridges and things like that. And that's been a big help. But it's not unrestricted funds. We can't use it to pave, Electric Ave or whatever. So as far as general unrestricted funds, we're not getting it from the state. It's not going to happen. We've been telling them for over 15 years that we need more money for the roads. We're not getting it. It's a dead end. The next option is a debt exclusion, which would also be a ballot measure, but basically the city assesses a fixed amount of increased taxes over a certain period of time. And correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, Auditor Brooks, but assesses a fixed amount over a given period of time, which gets put towards the specified purpose. But that's one-time funding for an ongoing need. Even if we were to do a debt exclusion for $30 million, which I don't even know if we can do, but just hypothetically, we'd spend that and then we'd start sliding back on the treadmill again, because that wouldn't keep coming in. Which leads us to option 3, a debt override, or a tax override, which would be a permanent increase in taxes above the allowed 2.5% per year. And after the first year, based on the conversation I had a while back with Auditor Brooks, after the first year, those funds would become unrestricted. They would go into the general fund, and then eventually, hopefully not under this administration, but under some future administration, we'd wind up with exactly the same problem we had with the excise tax, which was supposed to pay for the roads in the first place. Once it gets into the general fund, it ends up getting diverted slowly to other things, and once it's committed to those other things, it's virtually impossible to pull it back out again and put it towards the roads. And then there's option 4, which is we just keep telling people there's nothing we can do about the roads. I'm sorry that the roads suck. There's nothing we can do. This is an attempt to give the city a 5th option. And I think that's all I had to say on the matter initially. I think Councillor Brochman had wanted to add something.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we as councillors have to understand, we have to receive, so I understand what your position on gradual, but you can't, like I told Andy, you can't cut it too much, because the whole purpose of it is to try to get the roads done. And according to the letter from the previous administration commissioner, he said you really need about $9 million. $9 million. He said we have such a backlog of roads to be repaired that it's not cutting. We're not cutting it. We're not even putting a dent. So if we cannot get at least $4 million plus the $2 million I say, you're going to fall farther behind. And I give you an example. I keep on going back to the example, and I tell you, Franklin Road was paved 2 years before I came into office. 8 years later, Franklin Road was falling apart before they even dug it up. It was falling apart. The road was falling apart before we even dug it up. Kimball Street is a mess. Kimball Street was falling apart within 8 years. Yes, if you go to the commission, you say it lasted 22. It's all bumpy. But it lasted 8 years, and then we started getting potholes in Kimball Street. I'll work, because really, I don't want you guys to take I'll take the blame. I'll work to compromise. I believe that when I go, and I told you this, and I'll tell anybody this, if I had a Lamborghini and I stopped up here on the hill to get gasoline, they charged me $4. If she's got a Volkswagen Beetle and she stops at the same gas station, she pays $4 a gallon. There shouldn't be no variation. I bought an old car because I didn't want to put high mileage when I had to drive back and forth to Boston every day. That was the reason. And I didn't want to waste my money on a good car to put in 25 to 40,000 miles a year and spend $30,000 or $40,000 to have that kind of mileage. So you buy old cars, and I used to buy old cars, and I still do. I buy secondhand cars. So I believe that a person that uses the city streets should pay for something. I, too, have 2 cars, and it would cost me a lot of money, too. Do I support you putting a petition for $200? I say let's negotiate before we put the petition on the ballot and say this is what we're going to charge, and give them a set price so they know what they're voting on. Because if we leave it a blank, they don't know, and the numbers can change. And that's not right. And I wouldn't even support that. So I prefer that we sit down and we talk, and we come up with a number. If it's 150, so that's the number per car, up to so many cars. But we have to come up with something. We just can't leave it at $200, because the public's going to say, oh my God, $200 a car, I got 5 cars, it's $1,000. I'm voting no on this. And they didn't understand the whole petition. And it's not fair to the city. It's not fair to our house. This is our house. And it's our house, and we have to maintain our house. And we're not really doing that. We're not doing that. And we're hurting everybody. Not just Paul Boschman. We're hurting every creed there is out there to drive our city streets. And we have to do something about it. You know? I know I talk rough. But that's just the way I am. I talk rough. But we just can't keep on annoying it. We just can't. We got to take some responsibility. We're here to represent, to make the city better. That's what we're here for.
So I would love to put a comprehensive proposal on the ballot that details everything that we will, that gives a full proposal of exactly what would be passed into law. But realistically, that kind of drafting doesn't happen in a night or a month. And this is a conversation that Councillor Brochman and I have had. We're in agreement on the idea. But I do think that some of these details we need to leave until after we know if there's interest in the general concept, because there simply isn't a way that within the next few weeks before the ballots need to be printed, we could possibly hash out every necessary detail. I have Councillor Kuchar.
Thank you very much. I have heard, not just from the people here, but I have heard numerous people say, bad idea, I'm not, even if it makes it on the ballot, I'm not going to vote for it. And I have not heard anybody give a positive feed on this petition. I appreciate it. Paul, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the ideas, but this just isn't going to work. $200 per car. The worst part of it is the people that are going to be affected by it the most don't vote. That's the problem. Okay? So, and people are going to they're not going to go to the ballot, and if it does get elected in, they're going to be out of luck. And of course, it's their fault they didn't vote. I get that. But it's going to affect the poor people the most. You said it, Paul, in the city council as a whole, I'm tired of being poor. Everybody in this city is tired of being poor. We can't throw on another $200, $200, $150, $50, whatever it is. That's too much for the people of the city of Fitchburg. And with the bills that are currently sitting on Beacon Hill right now for the increase in Chapter 90 funding, I was reviewing it, and Councillor Cragen was showing me this as well. Supplemental municipal road funding, Bill H4572 for fiscal year 2022, additional $100 million for roads. Bill H4638, enact financing improvement to multiple roads and bridges, an additional $150 million. So where we might be getting $1 million now from the state, we could easily be seeing double, triple, if not more than that, coming up very shortly. What we need to do is we need to put pressure on our elected officials in the city, on Beacon Hill, to say, what the hell have you been doing for the past 15 years? I appreciate it, Paul, but this isn't going to fly.
Mr. Chair, may I address that comment that he made?
Well, we can't have debate back and forth.
I'm not having a debate. I just want to point out something. I understand when he tells me that the poor can't afford it. But the poor drive cars, and we seem to forget that. Just because they're poor, they drive cars, and their cars break down. And can they afford, I would rather pay $100 or $200 versus a $1,500 bill where I don't have the extra cash to give, and I have to wait. And I've seen this on Facebook, since you want to use the computer, underneath her page, that some lady says, my car's parked because I don't have the money, the $1,500 to fix my front end. So who are we hurting? You want to help the poor. I want to help the poor. And we are helping the poor. They're helping the poor by saying, let's put this question on the ballot and let the people decide. Let even the poor people decide. I have no control if you don't want to go and vote. You don't have any control if they don't want to go vote. But there are people that take the time to go and vote, and their voice should be heard. And that's the way I look at it. And if they don't like the proposal, it costs them nothing. They had the right to say, I want my roads fixed, and I know I don't want my roads fixed. That's all I'm asking. Why are you afraid? On that $100 million, if I'm not mistaken, out of that $100 million, they gave us 400, not Fitchburg, they put out 400, I think it was 400 million for additional, and that's why we get the extra money this year, if I'm not mistaken. I think we get an extra 400,000 or something like that. That's what we get out of it, if I'm not mistaken, because I read the same thing that you did. This plan, Council, is a good plan. It's an honest plan, it's a fair plan, and it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody. We may not think so, but it's a win-win situation. I go back again. Why
Counselor,
Oh.
we're getting a little repetitious.
All right.
Can I just address one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Paul, you commented on my comment. I'm going to comment on yours. What happens if this passes and somebody's front end needs to be redone? They don't have the money to do it, plus they're $200 in the hole because of this.
All right.
That's it.
All right. I will briefly note that I do share some skepticism about the state funding, only because even if it passes, $100 million divvied up across the state, with, of course, Boston and the cities and towns around it getting the lion's share, we'd get to pave an extra half-mile of road per year with that money. So, like I said, I do stand by the one thing that I am not really, I think, persuadable on is the state's not going to solve this for us. There's just no way. We can put pressure on them, but as long as Eastern Massachusetts has the dominance in the legislature that it does, we're not getting that money. Not the amounts that we need. Our delegation can do yeoman's work getting us what they can, but we're not going to get an additional $5 million out of the state or anything. Councillor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think everyone is in agreement that we need to pave more roads. I mean, that's clear. The city is cursed with steep hills, a high water table, and cruel winters that have a strong freeze-thaw cycle. Our roads do not last long, and we constantly need to repave them. And we've fallen behind, and this isn't a problem that started overnight. It's been going on for decades, that we've underinvested in our roads. The financial crisis that the city went through in 2008 was especially cruel because we were forced to shrink the size of our DPW in our highway department. And we have a fraction of the number of workers maintaining the roads that we used to. And it's a cruel problem that it keeps getting worse. As we aren't able to keep up with maintenance, our new roads don't last as long. The old ones get worse and worse. Every pothole you can patch it, but then it turns into a stream of moguls going down the street. So it is a problem that needs to be solved, and we have to find the money for it. And the hard part is it's not an easy solution. One thing that's often put forward is to put a paving line item in the budget. The budget's only so big; it's only so many slices of the pie. So if we're going to put another slice in, we got to take it from somewhere else. And to make a meaningful difference, we need millions of dollars to spend on the roads. So we're talking about eliminating whole departments. I mean, the Community Development Office has a budget this year of $622,000. It doesn't even pave a mile of road if it's a full reconstruction. So, I mean, the Board of Health is under $1 million. That's not even what we get for Chapter 90 funding. So there just isn't room to shift to make a meaningful difference that way. I mean, one way you can look at it is, okay, our revenues go up every year, hopefully. Roger Brooks makes sure of that we get a little more money. So you know what? If we have increases in the budget, maybe we direct those to the highway department. Maybe we direct those to a paving line item. This current budget had an increase of about $8.4 million. But the tough part is the cost of running the city goes up tremendously every year. And before we can do anything, about 97% of that $8.4 million goes straight to school spending, which is state mandated, to pension liabilities, that was also mandated. We have to catch up there. Employee benefits and general liability insurance. We have to pay those things. We don't have much of an option. So out of the $8.4 million, we have about $250,000 that has to cover every other cost increase in the city. And it's not easy to make that work. Auditor Brooks has a very difficult job to try to fit this in every year. And it's not a lot of money left to put towards road paving. So what we've done traditionally is used free cash appropriations. And it's good. It gives us flexibility. It says, we have free cash when we generate greater revenue from, say, new sources like cannabis sales taxes or host agreement fees or things like that pop up that we hadn't anticipated or can't appropriately budget. We can get new money. Or we have more money than we thought, or we end up spending less money than I thought. We don't say it takes longer to fill positions that are budgeted, or we have other projects that don't happen. We have money left over. It gets certified, and we can spend it on special projects. And that's one way we can do it is in times are good, we have the money, let's pave a road. And that's what we're doing this year. We're spending $800,000 to pave Clarendon Street. It's a full reconstruction with sidewalks. It's been in terrible shape. It's been dug up. It needs to happen. There are many other roads in the city that need just as much work. And this is a good year. We could do $800,000. Last year, not quite as good. We did a repaving of Oak Hill Road, a section of Oak Hill Road. And then we spent $300,000 on that. It was not as in-depth. Didn't involve sidewalks. We were able to do more with less. But we could do something. There are other years that, you know what, something else comes up. We need to spend that money on something else. And we don't have the money. Over the last 5 years, we've spent an average of $300,000 a year in free cash on road paving. And that does something. In some years it does more than others, but it's not enough to solve the problem. We do rely primarily on Chapter 90 funding. And that's calculated by a formula that's based off of our miles of road, our population, our number of, the size of our workforce. I don't know how it actually, makes any sense, but that's how the state does it, and we get $1.1 million a year is our calculation by that formula. And it's been level funded since 2012. And the price of asphalt has gone up a lot since then. Our allocation has not. That's what we get to spend. We get to do less and less with it. And this year there were supplemental bills that I believe have been passed or in the process of being passed that would tremendously raise the amount of money directed towards roads and bridges. But it's very important to consider those are one-time allocations. These are not changing the calculation formula. These are not changing what the amount's going to be next year. It's just a one-time allocation. And it doesn't go directly to us to change our allocation, to increase that $1.1 million. All that money is going to go to specific projects that are identified by the state. So that's not going to pad our budget to pave more roads. We may get funding for specific projects to replace a bridge or something else, but we're not going to be just given, here's money, go ahead and pave roads, and that's what we get with Chapter 90. And if we're going to wait for that money, we're going to be waiting a long time. And I think back to high school, the book I hated more than anything else, actually I think it was a play, was Waiting for Godot. I don't know if anyone else has read that, but it was interminable. It was a very, very short play, but it took forever. And it's all about waiting for something that never comes. And I hated it. I couldn't stand it. And that's what this is like. We can wait. We can say the legislature should do this, but it's not going to happen. And if we want to solve the problem, we have to act by ourselves. And President Zarella talked about the options of an override or a debt exclusion. Those things have problems. And while I applaud Councilor Bushman and Councilor Zarella for putting this forward, I think this has some questions too. I'm not sure that this is the answer. And if this is on the ballot, to be completely honest with you, I don't know if I'd vote for it. But I do support letting it go to the ballot because I think it's important to see what the priorities are of our voters. Because we need to see, is this something we need to spend money on? Or is this something, you know what, it's bumpy, I'll drive slower, I'll deal with it. It's not worth it. Some of the specific questions I have or concerns about it is, a lot of it was addressed by President Zarella of, how exactly do you make sure this only goes to roads? How do you make sure it just doesn't replace existing funding? There's really a supplemental funding source that makes it so we can do more. Because there's always the temptation in anything. Any new funding source, like the lottery that's going to go straight to building schools. So somebody always gets greedy. There's always a need. So how do you prevent that? That's one concern. think there's so many questions about how this would actually work in practice. I mean, just tonight there was mentioned, is it only on the first car or is it only on the second car? Is there that makes a difference as to whether or not this is a workable solution. And that really, I think we could probably figure it out, but it's a lot of unknowns. And the unknowns make it kind of tough. And lastly, $200 per car is a lot of money. And it's especially a lot of money for a lot of residents in a working class city like this. And I think the number is really, it seems, and I don't want to put words in Councilor Beauchamp's mouth, but that $200 figure was really come to by reverse calculation of trying to get to a funding number that we can make a difference. And that's one way to look at it, but we also have to look at the other way, is that what impact does that have on residents? And it's also a regressive funding, a regressive fee, that whether you're driving your Mercedes down Main Street or your beat-up 20-year Corolla held together with bail and twine and bondo, you're still paying the same $200. So there's an issue of fairness there. Does that make sense? But
I ask you not to talk about my Corolla like that. Thank you very much.
You have a very nice Corolla. But so there's a lot of questions about how do we, and we are limited by how this could be structured. This isn't an excise tax, which is based on the age and value of the car, and we can't necessarily do that because of the way of what right we have to institute fees versus taxes, and it's very complicated. So I have a lot of questions. I don't know that this is the answer, but I do think this is a problem that needs a solution, and a solution was put forward, and we should talk about it. I'm glad we're talking about it tonight. I'm glad this didn't get dismissed out of hand. I'm glad we're having the opportunity to talk about it, and I truly think it should go to the ballot. I don't know if I actually think it should be put into place because there's just so many questions, but I think there's a possible solution put forward. We should hear it. We should see what the voters' opinions are. However, is anyone else waiting to speak?
No.
Okay.
I am.
All right. Oh, I yield, and I'll come back later.
Thanks. So I have heard from the voters. I feel very confident that were this to go on the ballot in its present state, it would not pass. I also think that the way it was presented, I think it's great you guys have been talking about this for a year, but this was the first I heard of it was, on the document that came along. And I would strongly recommend that Councillor Beauchamp and Councillor Zarella, as they are able to maybe have some open forums with the residents. Every single resident I spoke to, and I spoke to some called, some texted, some Facebook messaged, people pulled me aside in, Market Basket, and it was all along the lines of, why are they doing this? And I had to explain, well, this is not being imposed. What is the question is, does it go on the ballot? Well, I'm not voting for it, would be the response. To that I say, well, let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about maybe having a discussion with residents and maybe using this space as Councillor Schultz is so good about doing and having ward meetings. Councillor Beauchamp, this might be a fine topic for a ward meeting where you actually are hearing from residents and they can express their own personal stories about the collapsing of their cars, and they can talk about how this would affect them personally. I do not support this going on the ballot in its present form. I have already heard from voters. They've made it really clear. I yield the floor.
Mr. Chair, one thing I didn't point out, I want to tell all the councilors, we spend in this city $400,000 a year to patch the roads. $400,000 a year. That's what we're spending. We spend $400,000. We spend $117,000 on hot patch, $105,000 on cold patch. You take the labor involved, and that's not counting the benefits. You spend $400,000. They patched last year. We patched Electric Avenue. 1 hour later, I drove back. I seen them patch and said, "Oh, great, they're fixing all the potholes." 1 hour later, I hit every pothole was. The stuff was no longer there. It was all out of there. You're we are throwing money out the window. You're spending $400,000. $400,000. And if you do that for 10 years, that's $4 million. Oh, right? 10 years out of zero, $4 million. 10 years, $4 million.
I just wanted to say that I've invited Councilors Zarella and Boschman to come to the Ward 1 meeting in October. So it's going to be held in this building October 10th at 6:30. To maybe by that time they'll have more of the details ironed out and they can actually talk with the residents.
Excellent.
And
That's Columbus Day. Oh, that's Columbus Day. Oh, so you're going to do it on Columbus Day? Yes. Okay. What time?
6:30.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what the cost is. Just to patch the roads, $400 million. And we just added another 3 more people that are going to do highway.
I really have to cut in. We're now at 45 minutes into this discussion. We've heard from you, really extensively, Councilor Boschman. Mm-hmm. We know this information. So at this point, it's becoming repetitive. I would like to move we call a vote on this particular item.
Second. I have a motion to amend, if you would be amenable before the vote.
it can happen on the motion to vote on it either way, but.
And we haven't heard from Councilor Cruz, so.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I try not to be repetitive here as we are going a little long. I do want to commend Councilors Boschman and Zarella on taking the initiative to bring forth this idea. It's not always the easiest thing to do, to open your ideas up and yourself up for criticism. I think too many of our elected officials dodge answers to difficult questions, and they stay in office without ever presenting any legitimate ideas, just pointing out problems. Having said that, like my colleagues here, the $200 flat fee, it's a non-starter for me. It fails to recognize the situations that so many of our residents are in. I think it would mostly affect the most vulnerable, our residents on a fixed budget, our seniors, our low-income residents, people who might have to choose between paying the road use fee and feeding their families at a given week. And it would affect small business owners. I spoke with a constituent. He has dozens of vehicles in the landscaping business here. Does that mean we're going to charge dozens of vehicles $200 each? And I know you've kind of mentioned it already, but that sends our business owners, right out of town. And who's to say that residents couldn't register their car in another town? I think we have a lot of work to do on potential legislation to get it to a point where it makes any sort of sense for me. But you're right. Our residents are hurting, and it's arguably the most important concern they have, the biggest concern they have. But we would be the first municipality in Massachusetts to do this, and there's a reason for that, charge a road use fee. So I thought it for a while, and I got that memo that Commissioner Laxo sent out in 2019. And I thought to myself, well, what about $100 a fee, $100 annual fee, excluding residents over 65, excluding cars less than 5,000, 2-vehicle cap on a single resident home, no more than 4 per business. $100 is $400 annually for a large business. It's getting there. But then as I got to that memo, and it's clearly outlined, say you cut your $4 million in half with my proposal to $2 million, my amendment, we're still not making a dent. We're still half of what it would take annually to tread water, as you put it in the memo, in 2019. And we've been here for 2.5 hours talking a lot about how much more expensive things are than they were a few years ago. We've seen it. And I'll just do one more statistic that I dug up for this conversation regarding the census in Fitchburg in particular. In 2020, our population decreased by just 0.31%. It's 126 people, which isn't crazy, but our median household income declined 4.41%. That's $2,524 total of our median income. It's kind of a big drop, right? And it's our working class, it's our middle class that's on its way out. And that's the people who are going to get squeezed by this, you know what I mean, by this amendment. Not just our low-income residents and our seniors that I was concerned about, or people on a fixed income, but the middle class in this country gets squeezed so much, and so much is put on them. And I very much feel as a council, as a body, we are being squeezed to make these difficult decisions and put this on our residents. The only reason that, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about it today and discuss it, the only reason I'm glad about that is because it would come in a question form on the ballot. If we were just to impose this on our citizens, it would be a hard no, and I think it would a hard no from everybody involved, probably. So part of me wants to see what this would do, because I've taken all the same calls and the same messages, and people pulled me over in gas stations and said, "Councilor Cruz," and I said, "Oh boy, here we go." And it's fine. We have a good conversation about how you feel, and you know, you kind of put their mind at ease that you don't think it's going to happen or however it might be. But it's. I don't think we have anywhere near enough time to get it on the ballot this year. I think you've already kind of mentioned that already, President Zarella, because it does need a lot of work. I'm not completely throwing it out the window yet, because it's a solution, and again, I commend you for bringing it forth, but it's just it just needs work. And Councilor Van Hesinger brought up some of our statistics as far as what we pay from our tax levy currently. A big chunk of that, and this you can probably call point of order if you'd like, a big chunk of that is about a fifth of it is just what we pay in health care, $16 million. I think it would behoove us, honestly, to have these award meetings and have larger conversations about where the money goes from top to bottom, and whether or not things, you know, what better solutions would be. By no means am I saying we eliminate health care. I want to just put that right for it. Health care is a necessity, but in other countries, other first world countries, it's a national health care. It's everyone gets the same health care, and their prices for medications and everything is a fraction of what it is here. But that's just kind of me having a much larger thought to it. But I think there are better ways, all the way from the top, of how we take care of ourselves systemically that would be better address this. Like universal health care, so that municipalities didn't have to pay.
Counselor.
We're off track, Mr.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we can't really talk about national health care policy.
I understand. I yield the floor. I think I've covered what I thought might have gotten missed.
All right. Before I take a motion, I just want to make two brief comments. Very brief, I promise. One is simply that I thank you for raising the issue of small businesses. I had meant to and forgot, to be honest. I have already been planning to set up a meeting with the chamber about this before, in terms of hashing out details, because I agree. We need to make sure that however we do this, it doesn't drive away business. I have always been very clear that business, and particularly small business, is very important to me in the city, particularly small business, because that's why I am where I am today. And so I agree. I certainly would not want to do anything that would be seen as detrimental to the small business community in Fitchburg. Second thing is just, I don't know if $200 is the right number, and I think that's honestly one of the key disagreements between myself and my co-sponsor on this is just that I think we can certainly talk about what numbers this would need to make the impact we want it to, but ultimately, if we are able to do this at any point in the future, we need to tailor it in a way that is going to be palatable to people. Getting it on the ballot in an ideal form is no good if it's a form that no one is going to be willing to support. And I apologize both to my colleagues and particularly to Councillor Boschman, because it's largely my fault that this didn't get to the council any sooner. I've been working on some of trying to craft some of the more detailed language for quite a while now, and for various reasons that are, probably of no interest or concern to anyone here, I didn't get it done as quickly as I wanted to, or as thoroughly as I wanted to. So I apologize for that. But in the situation where it is right now, Well, before I make any concluding remark, I'd like to hear what Councillor Van Hazinga's proposed amendment.
My proposed amendment would be to amend the proposed fee per vehicle to $100.
Do I have a second? Okay, no second. Then my concluding remark would just be, I think there seems to be a fairly strong consensus that this needs more work before we put it out to the public. I would be perfectly comfortable putting it on the ballot in kind of a more generalized advisory sense, again, to gauge interest in the concept. But that doesn't seem to be what the rest of the committee is, well, or some of the rest of the committee is interested in doing, and I get that. I get it. So if it needs more work, let's do the work. Councillor Cruz?
Is there any way, is a less definitive kind of way of putting it to the people, that we could sort of do some polling instead of putting it on the ballot?
Difficult, but not impossible. I'm not sure it would be through a legislative mechanism, but there probably is a way to get some kind of straw poll of the city. Logistically, that kind of thing is difficult, but it might be worth attempting. Councillor Creighton.
Sure. So, as many of you may know, I write Pet Talk and Pet of the Week for the Sentinel. I have just started writing a column called Tales from Tri-Town, which is based on this part of the world, and will run on the second Sunday. For a number of years, the Sentinel ran an overnight poll, and they would ask a yay or nay question. I would be very happy to speak to my editor and see if that is something they would be willing to do with their software. Because I do think this needs to be citizen-generated. I think the fact that it is coming from the City Council really freaked people out. And it was, not the right way. There is no debt exclusion or Prop 2.5 override that happened in the state of Massachusetts that was not driven by residents. Driven by residents. People may want to express their concerns and complaints and the rest of it. Encourage them to organize. Go to Bernie's meeting. Be present there. Have people have their say. That might, reveal more information, and it might reveal a different state. But at this present, what I'm promising here is I'll talk to Jake and see what he says. We can put this out there. And then, I think they have a way of finding whether people are, whether they would vote for it or not. Doodle polls. I mean, there's all different ways in the modern world, when you have email, where you can get a response from larger groups of people. And then you come in prepared. And that is, that's a good thing. And I think it would be reassuring to our residents who have spent an evening of their life among us. Thank you very much, Kevin and Janet and Miranda and my colleagues.
Councillor Van Hazinga?
With all due respect to polls in the Sentinel or Doodle polls emailed out, this would be a non-binding ballot question. It essentially is a poll. That's the purpose of putting it on the ballot, is to take a poll of the voters to see if this concept is a good idea or not. So if we want to do that, the best way is to put it on the ballot.
Sure, and then the language. I mean, guys, craft the language, and then, there's other elections coming. But people need to be talking about it as something that they want. And I've heard 100%. It is not what they want. Well, it's not what they want in its present state. It's not what they want. So if there's a way of non-binding language, the work of persuasion is lengthy and complex, and it's deep, and it's arduous. So I yield the floor.
Do I have a motion? I need a motion to dispose of this in some manner.
Motion to give leave to withdraw.
Second.
I have a motion and second to give leave to withdraw. All in favor? That's 3 in favor, 2 opposed. The committee's recommendation to be sent to the council will be to give this leave to withdraw. For my part, I will attempt to do what has been recommended and see if we can craft this into something more detailed and more nuanced, which was always the intent to begin with. But if the consensus is that it should be done before putting it on the ballot, then that's fine too. I would like to thank everyone who participated this evening. And I mean that. You know, you may have come out to oppose the thing that that Councilor Boschman and I put forward, but I would love to see more people taking the time and effort to make their voices heard here. So thank you, and I hope you have a good evening. That concludes our agenda for this evening.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. If there is no objection, we stand adjourned.